Winter, 1883. Wyoming. A starving widow stands in the last store in town, begging for food her dying son needs to survive. The owner refuses. The crowd watches in silence. No one moves to help. She has nothing left. No money, no hope, no future. Then a stranger steps forward, a drifter with cold eyes and a dangerous reputation. He offers her a choice that could save her life or destroy what's left of it. One decision. One moment. Everything changes. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The cold came down like a fist that winter. Clara Whitlock felt it through the thin wool of her coat as she stood outside Brennan's general store, her hand gripping her son's shoulder tight enough to leave marks. Eli was 7 years old and shaking, though whether from cold or hunger she couldn't say anymore. Probably both. The boy hadn't eaten a real meal in 3 days. She pushed open the door. The warmth inside hit her face, but it didn't reach her bones. Never did these days. Mrs. Whitlock. Brennan didn't look up from his ledger. His voice carried the flat tone of a man who'd already made up his mind about something. I told you last week. I know what you told me. Clara stepped up to the counter, keeping her voice steady. But my son needs to eat, and I need to get paid. I'll have money by the end of the month. The Hendersons said they'd hire me to do their... The Hendersons said that in November. It's January now. Brennan finally looked at her. His eyes weren't cruel, just tired. You're 4 months behind, Clara. I can't keep extending credit to someone who can't pay. The store wasn't crowded, but it wasn't empty either. Clara felt every pair of eyes on her back. Mrs. Talbot by the fabric, the Garrison brothers near the tools. Even young Timothy Hewitt, who used to play with Eli before her husband died, stared from behind his mother's skirts. Please. The word came out quieter than she meant it to. Just flour and beans, enough for a week. Can't do it. My son, I've got a family too. Brennan's jaw tightened. And if I give handouts to every widow in town, I'll be joining you in the poorhouse. That's just how it is. Clara's hand trembled on the counter. She pulled it back quickly, tucked it against her side where no one could see. You're condemning a child to starve. I'm running a business. Brennan looked back down at his ledger, and that was somehow worse than if he'd shouted at her. The dismissal was absolute. You should have thought about that before your husband went and got himself killed doing something stupid. The words hit her like a slap. Thomas hadn't been stupid. Reckless, maybe, too quick to trust a half-broken horse and his own ability to tame it. But not stupid. He'd been trying to earn money, trying to provide, trying to keep them from ending up exactly where they were now. That's enough, Brennan. Clara turned. She didn't recognize the voice. Low, rough, with an edge that suggested the speaker didn't use it much. The man stood by the door she'd just come through. Tall, maybe 40, with the kind of lean build that came from hard work and scarce meals. His coat was worn but clean, his hat pulled low enough to shadow most of his face. But she could see his eyes. Gray, like winter sky, and fixed on Brennan with an intensity that made the store feel suddenly smaller. This doesn't concern you, Hale. Brennan's tone changed. Defensive now. Didn't say it did. The man, Hale, didn't move from the door. But I need supplies, and I'd rather not wait while you finish humiliating this woman. I'm not... You are. Hale stepped forward then, slow and deliberate. And you're doing it in front of her boy, so finish your business with me instead. Brennan's face flushed red, but he didn't argue. Men like him didn't, Clara had learned. Not with men like Hale. She didn't know much about the drifter. He'd been in town maybe 3 weeks, staying at the boarding house, doing odd jobs for anyone who'd pay. People talked about him the way they talked about storms. Something dangerous passing through, best to keep your head down until it moved on. Come on, Eli. Clara took her son's hand. The boy hadn't said a word since they'd entered the store, and she was grateful for that at least. She didn't think she could bear it if he'd cried. Hold on. She stopped. Hale had moved to the counter, but he was looking at her, not Brennan. What do you need? Clara blinked. I'm sorry? Food. What do you need? Well, I don't... She stopped, understanding dawning slowly. I can't pay you back. Didn't ask if you could. Hale turned to Brennan. Flour, 20 pounds, beans, salt pork, coffee, if you've got it. Hale, I don't think... Don't. You'll take my money, same as anyone's. Hale pulled a small leather pouch from his coat and set it on the counter with a sound that said it held more than pennies. Or do you only refuse paying customers when they're women? Brennan's jaw worked like he was chewing something tough, but he reached for the flour. Clara stood frozen, Eli pressed against her side. She should say something, thank him, refuse the charity, something. But her throat had closed up, and all she could do was watch as Hale paid for enough food to keep them alive for 2 weeks, maybe 3 if she was careful. When Brennan had wrapped everything, Hale gathered the packages without a word and walked toward the door. He paused next to Clara. You got a wagon? She shook her head. How far is your place? 3 miles, north of town. He nodded once, then looked down at Eli. The boy stared back, wide-eyed. You know how to ride, son? Eli glanced up at Clara. She managed a small nod. Yes, sir, the boy whispered. Good. Go get my horse. The roan tied outside. Wait for me there. Eli looked at Clara again. She squeezed his hand once, then let go. The boy hurried out, and she was alone with Hale and the weight of everyone's stares. I can't repay you, she said quietly. Didn't ask you to. Then why? Hale looked at her for a long moment. His face was hard to read, weathered, scarred along the jaw, the kind of face that had seen things and decided not to talk about them. Because that boy shouldn't go hungry because adults are too busy being cruel to each other. He shifted the packages in his arms. And because Brennan's a coward who only picks fights, he knows he'll win. He walked out before she could respond. Clara stood there another moment, feeling the heat of shame and gratitude mixing in her chest until she couldn't tell them apart. Then she followed. Outside, the cold hit her again, but she barely felt it. Hale was loading the packages into saddlebags on a sturdy roan horse. Eli stood nearby, his small face pink from cold and something that might have been hope. I'll walk with you, Hale said. Make sure you get home safe. That's not necessary. Probably not. He glanced at the sky. But it'll be dark soon, and you're carrying food. That makes you a target for anyone desperate enough. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to say she'd been making that walk for months without help. But the truth was, she'd been lucky. And luck ran out eventually. All right, she said. They walked in silence for the first mile. Hale led the horse, Eli walking on the other side of the animal, occasionally reaching up to touch its neck. Clara kept pace beside them, her mind racing. She didn't trust this, didn't trust him. Men didn't help women for free. Not in her experience. They wanted something, money, labor, or worse. And Hale was a stranger with a reputation for being quick with his fists and slow to talk. The kind of man Thomas would have warned her away from. But Thomas was dead, and Eli was hungry. And sometimes you didn't get the luxury of good choices. You live alone? Hale's voice broke the silence. Yes? No family? No one to help? No. He nodded, like he'd expected that answer. The cabin in decent shape? Clara almost laughed. No. Roof? Leaks. Firewood? Running low. Animals? Had chickens. Foxes got them. Hale was quiet for a moment, then, how long since your husband died? 8 months. And the town's been helping? The town's been patient. Clara kept her eyes on the road ahead. There's a difference. Yeah. Something in his tone suggested he knew exactly what that difference was. There usually is. They reached the turnoff to her property as the sun started dipping behind the mountains. The cabin sat in a small clearing surrounded by skeletal trees and dead grass. Thomas had built it himself the year they married, and it had been sturdy once. Now it sagged like something tired of standing. This is it, Clara said unnecessarily. Hale studied the cabin with the same intensity he'd used on Brennan. She tried to see it through his eyes, the broken shutter, the gaps in the chinking, the pathetic curl of smoke from a chimney that probably needed cleaning. I'll bring the supplies in, he said. He did, making 3 trips while Clara got the fire built up and Eli huddled near the hearth. The cabin was just 2 rooms, the main room with the fireplace and table, and the smaller bedroom she shared with Eli. It wasn't much, but it had been home. Hale set the last package on the table, then straightened. He looked around the room with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You've got a saw?" Clara blinked. "What?" "A saw, for wood." Yes, outside." He nodded and walked out without explanation. Clara moved to the window, watching as he examined the woodpile Thomas had started 2 summers ago. There wasn't much left. She'd been burning it faster than she could replenish it, and her attempts to cut more had been clumsy at best. Hale picked up the saw, tested its edge, then set to work. "Mama?" Eli's voice was small. "Is he going to stay?" "No, sweetheart. He's just helping." "Why?" It was the same question she'd asked. She didn't have a better answer for her son than Hale had given her. "I don't know." She heated water and made coffee, strong and bitter the way Thomas used to like it. When Hale came back in an hour later, she had a cup waiting. He took it without comment, his hands rough with fresh splinters. Outside, the woodpile had doubled. "You need more than that," he said, "but it'll get you through a few days." "Thank you." He drank the coffee in silence, standing near the fire. Eli watched him with the unblinking fascination children had for things they didn't understand. "Your roof's got 3 holes I can see from the ground," Hale said finally. "The north wall's got gaps wide enough to lose a cat through. Your chimney's half blocked, and you're going to run out of firewood before February unless you can cut faster than you have been." Clara felt her cheeks burn. "I'm aware. Wasn't criticizing, just making a list." He set the empty cup on the table. "I can fix most of it. Take me maybe a week." She stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because it needs doing." "I can't pay you." "Didn't ask you to." He looked at her directly then, those gray eyes steady. "But I need a place to stay for a while. Boarding house is asking too much, and I don't sleep well around that many people anyway. I could use your barn if you've got one." "It's barely standing." "Then I'll fix that too." Clara's mind spun. It was too much, too generous. Men didn't work for free, didn't offer help without strings. "What do you really want?" Hale's expression didn't change. "I want a place to sleep that doesn't cost me $2 a week. I want to be useful, and I don't want to watch a woman and child freeze or starve when I can do something about it." He paused. "That's straight enough for you?" It should have been, but Clara had learned the hard way that what men said and what they did rarely matched. "If you try anything, I won't. If you touch my son, I won't." His voice hardened slightly. "I've got lines I don't cross, Mrs. Whitlock, and those are carved in stone." She searched his face for the lie, for the crack that would show his real intentions. But all she saw was exhaustion and something that might have been sincerity. "All right," she said finally. "1 week. You work, you can stay in the barn, but you keep your distance from us." "Fair enough." He left without another word. Clara stood at the window, watching him disappear into the darkness. Beside her, Eli tugged at her sleeve. "Mama? Is he nice?" She didn't know how to answer that. Nice wasn't the word she'd use for a man like Rowan Hale, but he'd fed them when no one else would, and that had to count for something. "I think," she said slowly, "he might be decent, and sometimes that's better than nice." The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of hammering. She dressed quickly and stepped outside to find Hale already on the roof, a pile of wooden shingles beside him. He worked with the methodical efficiency of someone who'd done this 100 times before. "You're up early," she called. He didn't stop working. "Sun's been up an hour." Clara felt another flush of shame. She'd slept later than usual, exhausted from worry and the strange relief of a full stomach. "I'll make breakfast." "Already ate." "Then I'll make lunch." He paused then, glancing down at her. "You don't have to feed me. I've got my own supplies." "You're working on my house. I'll feed you." Something that might have been a smile crossed his face, too quick to be sure. "All right then." She made bacon and eggs from the stores he'd bought, stretching the portions to feed 3. Eli ate like he'd forgotten what full felt like, and Clara had to stop herself from crying as she watched him. Hale came in at noon, his face flushed from work. He ate without talking, then went back out. The pattern repeated for 3 days. He fixed the roof, patched the walls, cleared the chimney, cut enough firewood to last them through March. Each night he disappeared into the barn, and each morning he was back before dawn, finding some new thing that needed repair. On the fourth day, Eli worked up the courage to approach him. Clara watched from the window as her son walked up to where Hale was reinforcing the barn door. The man stopped working and crouched down to the boy's level. They talked. She couldn't hear what about. And then Hale handed Eli a hammer and showed him how to drive a nail. Her chest tightened. Thomas used to do that. Used to take time to teach Eli things, patient and steady. She'd thought that part of her son's life was over. That night, Eli couldn't stop talking about Mr. Hale and what he'd learned. Clara listened, nodding in the right places, while part of her screamed warnings she didn't want to hear. This was temporary. Hale had said a week, and a week was almost over. Then he'd leave, and they'd be alone again. Better not to let Eli get attached. Better not to let herself get attached either. But watching him work, seeing the way he moved with quiet purpose, never asking for thanks or recognition, it was getting harder to remember why she was supposed to keep her distance. On the fifth day, the town came to her. Clara was hanging laundry when she heard the horses. 3 riders, Mayor Sutton, Sheriff Pierce, and Daniel Garrett, who owned the feed store. They stopped at the edge of her property, and she felt her stomach drop. Mrs. Whitlock. Mayor Sutton tipped his hat, his smile thin. Might we have a word? She set down the laundry basket slowly. About what? About your guest? Behind the cabin, she could hear Hale working, the rhythmic thunk of an axe splitting wood. Mr. Hale is helping with repairs. So we've heard. The mayor's smile didn't reach his eyes. The whole town's heard, actually, and folks are concerned. Concerned about what? Sheriff Pierce shifted in his saddle. He was younger than the mayor, harder looking. About a stranger living on your property, a widow's property. People talk, Clara. Let them talk. It's not that simple. Daniel Garrett leaned forward. Hale's got a reputation. He's been in fights, he's got a temper, and now he's living here alone with you and your boy. You can see how that looks. Clara's hands clenched into fists. He's staying in the barn. He's doing honest work. That's how it looks. To you, maybe. The mayor's voice took on a patronizing tone that made her teeth ache. But you're not thinking clearly. You're vulnerable right now, and men like Hale know how to take advantage of that. He's not taking advantage of anything. Are you sure about that? The sheriff's eyes narrowed. Because from where we're sitting, it looks like he's moved himself onto your property without so much as a by your leave. What's he getting out of this, Clara? What's he really after? The axe sounds had stopped. Clara glanced over her shoulder and saw Hale standing at the corner of the cabin, the axe still in his hand. His face was unreadable, but his posture was tense. That's my business, she said firmly. It's the town's business when it affects our reputation. The mayor straightened. We're a decent community, Mrs. Whitlock. We don't need outsiders coming in and… Where was this decent community when I was begging for food? Claire's voice rose before she could stop it. Where were you when my son was starving? When my roof was caving in? When I needed help? She stepped toward them, anger burning through her fear. You talk about reputation, but the only person who's actually helped me is the man you're here to run off. Clara, No. She cut the sheriff off. You don't get to do this. You don't get to ignore me until someone else steps in, then pretend you're protecting me. Mr. Hale has been nothing but respectful. He's worked hard. He's asked for nothing. And if that makes you uncomfortable, that says more about you than it does about him. The 3 men exchanged glances. The mayor's face had gone red. We're trying to help you, he said stiffly. You're trying to control me. There's a difference. Hale moved then, crossing the yard to stand beside her. Not in front of her, beside her. Close enough to be a presence, far enough to let her fight her own battle. Gentlemen? His voice was calm, but there was iron underneath. The ladies made herself clear. This isn't your concern, Hale. Sheriff Pierce's hand drifted toward his belt. She's made it my concern. The 2 men stared at each other, and Clara felt the weight of violence hanging in the air like a storm about to break. Don't. She put her hand on Hale's arm without thinking. His muscles were rigid under her touch. They're leaving. We're not finished here, the mayor started. Yes, you are. Clara kept her voice steady, even though her heart was hammering. You've said your piece. I've said mine. Now get off my property. For a moment, she thought they'd refuse. Thought the sheriff would push it, force a confrontation that would end in blood and regret. Then the mayor jerked his reins, turning his horse. "You're making a mistake, Clara." "Probably." She didn't move. "But it's mine to make." They rode off, leaving dust and tension in their wake. Clara stood there until they were out of sight, then realized she was still holding Hale's arm. She let go quickly, stepping back. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "For that. For them bothering you." Hale shook his head slowly. "They weren't bothering me. They were bothering you." He looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "You didn't have to defend me." "Yes, I did." Clara met his eyes. "Because they were wrong. And because—" She stopped, not sure how to finish. "Because what?" "Because you've been kinder to me in 5 days than most people have been in 8 months." The words came out raw, more honest than she'd intended. "And I'm tired of letting other people tell me what to think about kindness." Hale studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once, something like respect crossing his face. "Your boy's watching," he said quietly. Clara turned. Eli stood in the cabin doorway, his eyes wide. "It's all right, sweetheart," she called. "Come help me finish the laundry." But it wasn't all right. She knew that. The town had drawn a line, and she'd stepped over it. There would be consequences. She just didn't know what they'd look like yet. That night, after Eli was asleep, Clara sat at the table with the lamp burning low. She heard the barn door creak and looked up to see Hale crossing the yard toward the cabin. She stood, suddenly nervous. He knocked softly, then entered when she called. His hair was damp, like he'd washed in the creek despite the cold. "Wanted to talk," he said. "All right." He stayed near the door, maintaining that careful distance he'd kept since the first day. "What happened today? That's going to make things harder for you." "I know. The town's going to push back. They'll make it difficult. Maybe refuse you service again. Maybe worse." "I know," she repeated. "So I'll leave." He said it simply, like it was already decided. "Finish the repairs tomorrow, then move on. That'll settle things down." Clara looked at him, really looked at him. At the way he stood, ready to walk away from the first place he'd stopped in, who knew how long. Ready to leave behind work unfinished, a warm barn, regular meals. Ready to sacrifice his own comfort to make her life easier. And she realized something. She didn't want him to go. Not because of the repairs, though those mattered. Not because of the food or the firewood or the security of having another adult nearby. But because Rowan Hale was the first person in 8 months who treated her like she deserved better than scraps and pity. "What if I don't want you to leave?" she heard herself say. He went very still. "Clara, Mrs. Whitlock," she corrected automatically, then shook her head. "No, actually, Clara's fine." "Clara." He said her name carefully, like testing its weight. "You need to think about this, about what you're risking." "I have thought about it." She stood, moving closer to the fire. "I've thought about nothing else for days. And you know what I've decided? I'm tired of being afraid, tired of letting other people make choices for me because I'm too scared to make my own. Fear keeps you alive sometimes, and sometimes it just keeps you small." She turned to face him. "You asked what you really want. I'm asking you the same thing now. Do you want to leave?" Hale's jaw tightened. "No." "Then stay. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having ever is." They stood there in the lamplight, the fire crackling between them, and Clara felt something shift. Some wall she'd been building since Thomas died, brick by careful brick, started to crack. "All right," Hale said finally. "I'll stay. But on one condition." "What's that?" "You let me do this right." He met her eyes. "I don't want you defending me to the town because you feel obligated. I don't want you caught in the middle of something that's going to hurt you. So if I'm staying proper. I'll work for wages. You can pay me when you're able. I'll keep to the barn. And I'll make it clear to anyone who asks that this is a business arrangement. Nothing more." Clara felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. "All right. And Clara?" He paused at the door. "Thank you for standing up for me today. No one's done that in a long time." He left before she could respond. Clara sat back down at the table, her hands shaking slightly. She'd just made a choice that would change everything. She knew that. The town wouldn't forgive her easily for defying them. Life was going to get harder before it got better. But for the first time since Thomas died, she felt like she was moving forward instead of just surviving. And that had to count for something. The town showed its teeth slowly. It started with small things. Mrs. Talbot crossed the street when she saw Clara coming. The Garrison brothers stopped tipping their hats. When Clara brought Eli to the schoolhouse 3 days later, the teacher, Miss Brennan, the store owner's sister, stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. "I'm afraid Eli can't attend today." Clara kept her hand on her son's shoulder. "Why not?" "We're having some repairs done. It's not safe for the children." "I don't see any workers." Miss Brennan's smile was tight as wire. "They'll be here shortly. Perhaps try again next week." Clara didn't try again next week. She knew a closed door when she saw one. Hale said nothing when she told him, just kept working. He'd finished the cabin and moved on to the barn, shoring up walls and replacing rotted boards. He worked from dawn until dark, stopping only to eat the meals Clara prepared and to teach Eli small things: how to sharpen a knife, how to read weather in the clouds, how to track animals through snow. The boy followed him everywhere, soaking up attention like drought-cracked earth finally getting rain. Clara watched them together and felt her chest tighten with something she couldn't name. Gratitude, maybe. Or fear that this too would be taken away. 2 weeks after the mayor's visit, Daniel Garrett rode out alone. Clara was mending clothes on the porch when she saw him coming. She set down her needle and stood, trying to keep her face neutral. "Mr. Garrett." He dismounted, looking uncomfortable. "Clara, afternoon. Is there something I can help you with?" Garrett glanced toward the barn where the sound of hammering echoed. "Actually, I came to help you, if you'll let me." She waited. "Look." He took off his hat, running his hand through thinning hair. "What the mayor and the sheriff did, coming out here like that, it wasn't right. You're going through a hard time, and instead of helping, we made it worse." "Yes, you did." "I know." He met her eyes. "And I'm sorry for that. But Clara, you have to understand, people are worried, not because they think you're doing something wrong, but because they don't know this man. He showed up out of nowhere, and now he's living on your property, spending time with your boy. Can you honestly say you're not taking a risk?" "Everything's a risk, Mr. Garrett. Eating is a risk when you don't know where your next meal's coming from. Staying warm is a risk when your roof leaks and you can't afford repairs. Living is a risk." She crossed her arms. "But Rowan Hale has done nothing but help me. So if the town's worried, maybe they should ask themselves why a stranger treats me better than people I've known for years." Garrett flinched. "That's fair. And you're right. We should have done more. But it's not too late. I talked to some folks and we want to help, really help. We can set up an account at the store for you. No interest. Pay when you can. And I'll talk to the Hendersons about that job. Make sure they follow through this time." It was a good offer. A generous offer. The kind of help Clara had been praying for back when prayer still seemed like it might work. But she'd learned something in the past 2 weeks. She'd learned what real help looked like. And it didn't come with conditions or judgment or the need to control. "I appreciate that, Mr. Garrett. I do. But I'm managing fine now." "Because of Hale." "Yes, because of Hale." Garrett's mouth pressed into a thin line. "And when he leaves, what then?" "Then I'll figure it out, like I have been." "Clara, I'm not trying to be difficult." She softened her voice slightly. "But you're asking me to choose between the devil I know and the devil I don't. Except Hale hasn't been a devil. He's been decent. And I can't turn my back on that just because it makes other people uncomfortable." Garrett looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. "You always were stubborn. Thomas used to say the same thing. He'd want you to be careful. He'd want me to be alive. There's a difference." Clara picked up her mending. "Thank you for coming out here. I mean that. But unless you're here to actually help, no strings, no judgment, I think we're done." Garrett put his hat back on, shaking his head. "You're making a mistake, Clara, a big one. And when it falls apart, don't expect the town to pick up the pieces." He rode off without waiting for a response. Clara sat back down, her hands shaking as she tried to thread the needle. She'd just burned another bridge, maybe the last one. That looked tense. She looked up. Hale stood at the corner of the porch, a board propped against his shoulder. She hadn't heard him approach. "You were listening." "Hard not to." He set the board down, leaning it against the wall. "You made a fair offer." "I know. You turned it down anyway. I know that too. Hale studied her, his gray eyes unreadable. Why? Clara set down the mending again. Because it came with a price. Accept their help, and I have to accept their control. I have to let them decide what's appropriate for a widow, who I can trust, how I should live. She looked up at him. I'm tired of being managed, Mr. Hale. I'd rather struggle on my own terms than thrive on someone else's. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe. Or understanding. Just Hale's fine, he said quietly. What? You don't have to call me Mr. Hale. Just Hale. He picked up the board again. And for what it's worth, you made the right choice. Men like Garrett don't help. They invest, and they expect a return. He walked back to the barn before she could respond. That night, Clara lay awake listening to the wind rattle the shutters that Hale had fixed. The cabin was warmer now, more secure, but the isolation pressed down on her like a physical weight. She'd chosen this. Chosen pride over practicality. Chosen a stranger over her community. What if Garrett was right? What if Hale left tomorrow, or next week, or next month? What then? But even as the question circled, she knew she couldn't go back. Wouldn't go back. Something had changed in her when she'd stood up to the mayor. Some part of her that had been sleeping since Thomas died had woken up, angry and alive. She'd rather face the consequences of her own choices than live under the weight of someone else's. The next morning brought snow. It came down heavy and fast, turning the world white in hours. Hale worked through it, insulating the barn while Clara kept Eli inside and tried to stretch their supplies. By afternoon, the wind had picked up, howling through the trees like something wounded. Clara stood at the window, watching the drifts pile up, and felt the familiar grip of worry. They had food for now, firewood for a few weeks if they were careful. But winter in Wyoming wasn't something you survived through luck. It took preparation and resources, and most importantly, it took community. People checking on each other, sharing supplies, helping dig out when the storms passed. Clara didn't have that anymore. The knock came just before dark. She opened the door to find Sheriff Pierce standing on her porch, snow-crusted on his coat and hat. Behind him, barely visible through the storm, 2 more men sat on horses. Sheriff? Clara didn't open the door wider. This isn't a good time. Won't take long. Pierce's voice was flat. I need to speak with Hale. About what? That's between me and him. Clara's hand tightened on the door. He's working. Can this wait until the storm passes? No. Pierce looked past her into the cabin. Where is he? The barn. Get him. It wasn't a request. Clara pulled her shawl tighter and stepped out into the snow. The cold hit her like a slap, but she pushed through it, crossing the yard to the barn. Inside, Hale was stacking hay, his coat discarded despite the temperature. Sheriff's here, she said. He wants to talk to you. Hale straightened slowly. What about? He didn't say. Clara glanced back at the cabin. But he brought men with him. Something dangerous flickered across Hale's face, there and gone in an instant. He pulled on his coat without a word and followed her out. Pierce stood where she'd left him, flanked now by the 2 men who'd been on horses. Clara recognized one, Jacob Marsh, who worked at the livery. The other was a stranger, older, with the hard look of someone who'd spent time on the wrong side of the law. Hale! Pierce's hand rested on his gun belt. We need to talk. So talk. There was an incident at the Riverside Saloon last night. Fight broke out. Man got hurt bad. And? And witnesses say you were involved. Hale's expression didn't change. I was here, working. You got someone who can verify that? I can. Clara stepped forward. He's been here every night for 2 weeks. He doesn't go into town. Pierce's eyes shifted to her. With respect, Mrs. Whitlock, you're not exactly an unbiased witness. Then find someone who is, but you won't because he's telling the truth. Maybe. Pierce looked back at Hale. But I've got 3 men who say different. Say they saw you clear as day throwing punches and breaking furniture. So either they're lying or you are. They're lying. Why would they do that? Because someone paid them to. Hale's voice stayed level, but Clara heard the edge underneath. Or because they don't like outsiders. Or because they're looking for someone to blame and I'm convenient. Take your pick. The stranger spoke up, his voice rough. That's a lot of accusations for an innocent man. And this is a lot of trouble for someone who wasn't even there. Hale crossed his arms. You want to arrest me, Sheriff? Do it. But you better have more than the word of 3 drunks who can't keep their stories straight. Pierce's jaw tightened. I've got enough to bring you in for questioning. On what charge? Assault. Maybe attempted murder, depending on whether the victim makes it through the night. Clara felt the air leave her lungs. This is ridiculous. He was here. I already told you. And I'm telling you that your word doesn't carry the weight it used to. Pierce finally looked directly at her, and there was something almost like pity in his eyes. You made your choice, Clara. Now you get to live with it. So this is punishment. The words came out bitter. You couldn't run him off, so now you're framing him. I'm doing my job. Your job is to protect people, not persecute them because they don't bow down to the mayor's wishes. Careful, Clara. Pierce's voice dropped. You're already on thin ice with this town. Don't make it worse. Or what? You'll arrest me too? If I have to. The threat hung in the cold air between them. Hale put his hand on Clara's arm, gentle but firm. It's all right. No, it's not. Clara. He looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her throat close. Resignation, like he'd expected this. I'll go with them. Answer their questions. This'll get cleared up. You can't trust them. I know. He turned to Pierce. But fighting won't help, so let's get this over with. Pierce nodded to the 2 men. They moved forward, and Clara saw the rope in Marcia's hands. That's not necessary, she said sharply. Protocol. Pierce's tone said the discussion was over. They bound Hale's wrists in front of him, rough enough to make a point. He didn't resist, didn't react at all. Just stood there in the snow and let them. Clara wanted to scream, wanted to fight, wanted to do something other than stand there helpless while they took the only person who'd helped her in months. I'll find a lawyer, she said desperately. Don't. Hale's voice was quiet but absolute. Don't waste money you don't have. I'll handle this. How? By telling the truth. He glanced at Eli, who'd appeared in the cabin doorway, small and scared. Take care of your boy. Keep the fires going. I'll be back. You don't know that. Yeah. His mouth quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. I do. They led him to one of the horses. He mounted awkwardly with his hands bound, and Clara noticed he didn't ask for help, just did it himself, keeping whatever dignity he could. Pierce paused before mounting his own horse. For what it's worth, Clara, I hope you're right about him. Because if you're not, you've put yourself and your boy in danger for nothing. And if I am right, what then? Then I guess you'll have proven that trusting a stranger over your own community was worth the cost. He swung into the saddle. But I wouldn't bet on it. They rode off into the storm, taking Hale and any sense of security Clara had managed to build. She stood in the snow until she couldn't feel her feet, then went back inside to find Eli crying. Where'd they take him? The boy sobbed. To town, to answer some questions. But he didn't do anything wrong. I know, sweetheart. Then why'd they arrest him? Clara pulled her son close, feeling his small body shake against hers. Because sometimes people don't care about what's right. They care about what's convenient. I don't understand. I don't either. She kissed the top of his head. But we're going to figure it out. That night was the longest Clara could remember. She kept the fire going, kept Eli fed and warm, kept herself from falling apart by sheer force of will, but inside she was screaming. They'd taken him, just like that, on the word of strangers and the flimsiest of accusations. And she couldn't do anything to stop it. The next morning, she bundled Eli up and walked into town. The snow had stopped, leaving everything buried and beautiful. Clara barely noticed. She headed straight for the sheriff's office, her jaw set. Pierce looked up when she entered, unsurprised. Mrs. Whitlock? Where is he? In a cell, where he'll stay until we sort this out. It's been 12 hours. How long does it take to sort out a lie? Pierce leaned back in his chair. As long as it needs to. The man who got hurt is still unconscious. Until he wakes up and can tell us what happened, Hale stays locked up. That's not justice. That's a cage. That's caution. Pierce's eyes hardened. You keep defending him like he's some kind of saint, but you don't know him, Clara. You don't know where he's been or what he's done. For all you know, he's got a history of this kind of violence. Then check. Send a telegram. Do actual investigating instead of just locking him up because it's easier. I am investigating, and until I'm satisfied he's innocent, he stays put. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to rage at the unfairness of it all, but she could see it wouldn't matter. Pierce had made up his mind, and nothing she said would change it. She turned to leave, then stopped. Can I see him? No. Why not? Because I said so. Pierce stood, walking around the desk. Go home, Clara. Take care of your boy. And think real hard about whether this is the hill you want to die on. It's not a hill. It's a person. And he deserves better than this. Maybe. But life doesn't give us what we deserve. It gives us what we can survive. He opened the door. Now go, before I decide you're obstructing an investigation. Clara left before he could make good on the threat. Outside, the town was waking up. People moved through the streets, going about their business. A few glanced at her, their expressions ranging from pity to contempt. No one spoke. She walked to Brennan's store, steeling herself. The bell chimed when she entered. Brennan looked up from his ledger, his face closing off the moment he saw her. No. I haven't asked anything yet. Don't need to. Answer's still no. Clara moved to the counter anyway. I need supplies. I'll pay cash. That made him pause. Cash? She pulled out the small leather pouch Hale had left in the barn. He'd told her it was for emergencies, for things she might need while he worked. She'd refused to touch it until now. But this was an emergency. $30, she said, setting the pouch on the counter. That should cover flour, beans, salt pork, coffee, and whatever else you think is fair. Brennan stared at the pouch like it might bite him. Where'd you get that kind of money? Does it matter? It does if it's stolen. Clara's temper, already frayed, snapped. It's not stolen. It's wages. Payment for honest work. Now are you going to sell me supplies, or are you going to accuse me of being a thief, too? Brennan's face flushed, but he reached for the pouch. He counted the money slowly, then started gathering supplies without a word. Clara waited, her heart pounding. She'd just spent money that wasn't hers, money Hale had earned and saved, but they needed food, and pride wouldn't keep them fed. When Brennan had everything wrapped, she gathered it up and turned to leave. Clara, she stopped. That man in the jail. He's dangerous. I've heard things. What things? That he's been in prison before. That he's killed men. That he drifts from town to town because he can't stay anywhere long without causing trouble. Brennan leaned forward. I know you think he's helping you, but men like that don't help. They use. And when they're done, they move on and leave wreckage behind. Clara looked at him for a long moment. You know what's interesting, Mr. Brennan? You've known me for 3 years. You knew Thomas. You've watched me struggle for 8 months. And in all that time, you never once wondered if maybe I deserved help instead of judgment. She shifted the packages in her arms. But a stranger shows up and treats me with basic human decency. And suddenly, everyone's an expert on who I should trust. Funny how that works. She walked out before he could respond. The walk back to the cabin felt longer than usual. The supplies were heavy, and Eli kept asking questions she couldn't answer. Where was Mr. Hale? When would he come back? Why did the sheriff take him? Clara didn't know. She didn't know anything anymore except that the world was crueler than she'd ever imagined, and kindness was apparently a crime punishable by suspicion and isolation. The next 3 days blurred together. Clara kept the cabin running, kept Eli occupied, kept herself from breaking by staying busy. She chopped wood until her hands blistered. She cleaned things that didn't need cleaning. She mended clothes that were already mended. Anything to keep from thinking about Hale sitting in a cell, alone and probably cold, paying for the crime of helping her. On the 4th day, she walked back to town. She didn't go to the sheriff's office this time. She went to the boarding house where Hale had stayed before moving to her barn. The owner, Mrs. Chen, answered the door with a wary expression. Mrs. Whitlock? Mrs. Chen, I need to ask you about Rowan Hale. I don't gossip about my tenants. I'm not asking you to gossip. I'm asking you to tell the truth. Clara met the older woman's eyes. Did he cause any trouble while he stayed here? Any fights, any violence, anything that would make you think he's dangerous? Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. No. He was quiet, paid on time, kept to himself. Then would you tell that to the sheriff? I already did, 2 days ago. She sighed. He wasn't interested. Clara's stomach sank. Why not? Because it doesn't fit the story he wants to tell. Mrs. Chen glanced behind her, then stepped out onto the porch, lowering her voice. Between you and me, this isn't about what Hale did or didn't do. It's about making an example. The town doesn't like outsiders, and they really don't like outsiders who make them look bad by showing more decency than they do. So they're just going to keep him locked up? Until they can't anymore. Mrs. Chen put her hand on Clara's arm. I'm sorry. I wish I could help more. But I'm an outsider too, in my own way. My word doesn't carry weight here. Clara nodded numbly. Thank you for trying. She walked back through town in a daze. This wasn't justice. It was revenge dressed up in legal clothing, and there was nothing she could do about it. She was halfway home when she heard the horse behind her. Clara turned to find Daniel Garrett riding up, his expression grave. Clara, wait. She stopped, too tired to argue. Garrett dismounted. I heard what you've been doing, asking questions about Hale, trying to prove he's innocent. Someone should. Maybe. But you're not going to change anyone's mind, not the sheriff's, not the mayor's, not the town's. He paused. There is another way, though. Clara looked at him. What way? Drop him, publicly. Tell the sheriff you were wrong about Hale, that you see now he was taking advantage of you. Ask the town for forgiveness and help. And in exchange, they'll let him go. Run him out of town, probably, but at least he'll be free. And you, Garrett's voice gentled. You can come back. We can help you, really help you. No strings, no judgment, just neighbors taking care of one of their own. It was tempting. So tempting Clara could taste it. All she had to do was lie. Say Hale had fooled her, manipulated her, used her desperation against her. Paint herself as a victim instead of someone who'd made a choice. And in return, she'd get everything she needed. Security, community, a future for Eli that didn't involve scraping by on the edge of survival. All it would cost was her integrity. No, she said quietly. Garrett's face fell. Clara, I said no. She looked at him, and for the first time since Thomas died, she felt absolutely certain about something. I won't lie about Hale. I won't betray him to save myself. Because if I do that, I'm no better than the people who turned their backs on me when I needed them most. You're being stubborn. I'm being honest. There's a difference. Clara started walking again. Thank you for the offer, Mr. Garrett, but I'll find another way. She didn't look back to see his reaction. That night, Clara sat at the table with a piece of paper and a pencil, trying to figure out what another way might look like. She had some money left from Hale's pouch, enough for a few more weeks of supplies if she was careful. The cabin was in good shape now thanks to his work. The firewood would last. But she needed more than that. She needed income. She needed a plan that didn't rely on the town's charity or Hale's labor. She needed to stand on her own. The idea came to her slowly, piecing itself together from fragments. The cabin was secure now. The barn too. She had space. And she had skills. She could sew, could cook, could manage a household. Thomas had taught her to read and write better than most women in town. What if she took in work? Mending, maybe. Laundry. Things people needed but didn't want to do themselves. It wouldn't be much, but it would be hers. She started making a list, planning it out. By the time Eli went to bed, she had the skeleton of something that might work. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even good. But it was a start. And right now, that was enough. The next morning, Clara rode into town with Eli beside her, carrying a sign she'd made from one of Hale's scrap boards. She set it up in front of the general store, ignoring Brennan's glare through the window. The sign read, Mending and laundry, fair prices, good work. Then she waited. People passed by, most pretending not to see her. But eventually, someone stopped. It was Mrs. Chen. How much for mending? The older woman asked. Clara named a price. Mrs. Chen agreed without haggling and promised to bring by a basket of clothes that afternoon. It wasn't much, but it was something. Over the next few days, a few more people came. Quiet transactions, no friendliness, but no hostility either. Just business. Clara took every job she could get. She sewed until her fingers ached, washed clothes until her hands were raw. Eli helped where he could, and slowly, painfully, they built a rhythm that didn't depend on anyone's charity. A week after Hale's arrest, the man from the saloon finally woke up. Clara heard about it from Mrs. Chen, who'd heard it from her cousin who cleaned at the doctor's office. The man's name was Collins, and he told the sheriff that Hale hadn't been anywhere near the fight. It had been 3 other drifters, men who'd left town the next morning, men no one could find now. The sheriff had no choice but to let Hale go. Clara was hanging laundry when she saw him walking up the road. He looked thinner, tired, with a bruise along his jaw that hadn't been there before. But he was walking under his own power, and his eyes were clear. Eli saw him first and took off running, shouting Hale's name. Hale caught the boy as he crashed into him, stumbling slightly, but holding on. Clara saw him close his eyes briefly, his hand coming up to rest on Eli's head. She walked over slowly, her heart in her throat. "You're back." "I'm back." His voice was rough from disuse. "Are you all right?" "I've been better. I've been worse." He set Eli down gently. "You?" "We managed." She gestured at the laundry, the neat stacks of mended clothes waiting to be returned. "I found work. We're making it." Hale looked at everything she'd built in his absence, and something shifted in his expression. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did. I can't keep relying on other people, not even you." She swallowed hard. "But I'm glad you're back. Eli missed you, and the barn needs Clara." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "I'm not going back to the barn." Her heart stopped. "You're leaving?" "No, I'm staying." "If you'll have me." He looked at her directly. No walls, no distance. "But I'm not doing this halfway anymore. I'm not hiding in your barn and pretending this is just about work. I want to be here, really here. I want to help you build something that lasts. I want to be part of your life, part of Eli's life." He paused. "If that's what you want too." Clara stared at him, her mind racing. This was what Daniel Garrett had warned her about, what the whole town had condemned her for, trusting a stranger, letting him into her life, her home, her family. It was dangerous. It was reckless. It went against everything she'd been taught about propriety and caution. But standing there, looking at Rowan Hale, bruised and tired and asking for nothing but a chance, Clara realized she'd already made her choice. She'd made it the first day he'd helped her. Every day since had just been her trying to catch up to a truth she already knew. "Yes," she said simply. "That's what I want too." Hale's shoulders dropped, tension releasing. "All right then." "All right." She smiled, small but real. "But you're still fixing the chicken coop. Foxes got in again." He laughed, the sound rough, but genuine. "Yes, ma'am." Eli grabbed his hand. "Can you teach me more tracking? You said you would before they took you." "After I clean up, deal?" "Deal." They walked back to the cabin together, and Clara felt something settle in her chest. It wasn't safety exactly. The town still hated her. Money was still tight. Winter wasn't over. But for the first time in 8 months, she wasn't facing it alone. And that changed everything. The confrontation came on a Tuesday. Clara was in the garden behind the cabin, trying to coax life back into soil that hadn't been properly tended in over a year. Hale had built her a small fence to keep out rabbits, and she was planting early vegetables, peas, lettuce, things that might survive if the weather cooperated. Her hands were black with dirt, her back aching, but it felt good, felt like progress. She heard the horses before she saw them, 6 riders this time. Mayor Sutton at the front, flanked by Sheriff Pierce and 4 men Clara recognized from around town, Jacob Marsh from the livery, the Garrison brothers, and Samuel Brennan himself, looking uncomfortable but resolute. Clara stood slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. Her heart hammered, but she kept her face neutral. "Gentlemen." "Mrs. Whitlock." The mayor dismounted, and the others followed. "We need to have a conversation." "About what?" "About the situation here, about what's appropriate and what isn't." Sutton's voice carried the weight of authority he clearly believed he possessed. "It's come to our attention that Mr. Hale has moved into your home." Clara's jaw tightened. "He's staying in the barn, like he has been." "That's not what we've heard." Marsh spoke up, his tone accusatory. "People have seen him coming and going from the cabin at all hours, seen him eating meals with you. Seen him teaching your boy like he's got some kind of right. He's helping me, that's all. That's not all, and you know it. Sutton stepped closer, his face hard. You're living with a man you're not married to. You're letting him act as a father to your son. You're making a mockery of decent behavior. And frankly, Clara, you're making this town look bad. I'm making you look bad? The words came out sharp. You left me to starve. You turned your backs when I needed help. And now you're standing on my property telling me I'm the one who should be ashamed? We're trying to protect you, Sheriff Pierce cut in, and protect your boy. This man, you don't know him. He could be anyone. He could be dangerous. He was locked in your jail for a week on false charges, Clara shot back. The only dangerous thing about Rowan Hale is that he made you all look like cowards. Brennan flinched at that, but Sutton's face went red. You need to listen very carefully, Mrs. Whitlock. What you're doing here, it stops. Today. Either Hale leaves or we'll make him leave. You have no authority to do that. We have every authority. This is our town, our community, and we won't stand by while you drag its reputation through the mud. Sutton's voice dropped, taking on a threatening edge. You think you can defy us? You think you can just do whatever you want without consequences? I think I can live my own life without asking your permission. Not when that life affects the rest of us. Clara opened her mouth to respond, but a voice cut through from behind her. That's enough. She turned. Hale stood at the corner of the cabin, his arms crossed, his expression carved from stone. He must have heard the horses and come around from the barn. Eli peeked out from behind him, eyes wide. This doesn't concern you, Hale, Sutton said. She just said my name. That makes it concern me. Hale walked forward slowly, deliberately. He stopped beside Clara, not in front of her. Beside. And you're on her property making threats. So unless you've got legal business here, you need to leave. Our business is with her, not you. Your business is trying to control her, and I'm making it my business to tell you that won't work. Hale's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. You want to run me out of town? Try. But you'll have to go through me to do it, and I promise you that won't end the way you think. The Garrison brothers shifted, hands moving toward their belts. Hale noticed but didn't react, didn't tense or reach for his own gun. He just stood there, steady as bedrock. Are you threatening officers of the law? Pierce's hand went to his weapon. I'm telling you facts. You start something here, people get hurt. Maybe me, maybe you, maybe someone who didn't ask to be part of this. Hale glanced at Eli, then back at the sheriff. Is that what you want? Violence on a widow's property in front of her child. Because that's what you're building toward. We're trying to protect her, Chaco. From what? From having help? From having someone who gives a damn whether she lives or dies? Hale's voice hardened. You want to protect her? Where were you 8 months ago? Where were you when she was begging for food? When her roof was caving in? When her boy was hungry and cold and you all just looked the other way? That's not fair, Brennan said quietly. Fair? Hale turned to him. You run the only store in town. You knew she was struggling. You could have extended credit, could have helped, could have done anything except what you did, which was humiliate her in front of half the town and send her home empty-handed. Don't talk to me about fair. Brennan looked away. Mayor Sutton's face had gone from red to purple. You think you can come into our town and tell us how to live? You're nothing but a drifter, a vagrant with no ties, no history, no right to be here. You're right. I don't have a right to be here. Hale's voice dropped. But Clara asked me to stay. She made that choice. And you standing here trying to undo it because it makes you uncomfortable? That's not about protecting her. That's about control. It's about decency. Decency? Hale laughed, bitter and sharp. You wouldn't know decency if it spit in your eye. Decency is helping someone when they need it, not when it's convenient. Decency is treating people with respect, not judgment. And decency sure as hell isn't riding out here with 6 armed men to intimidate a woman into doing what you want. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Clara's hands had balled into fists at her sides. She'd been defending herself for weeks, fighting battles alone, trying to prove she deserved basic human kindness. And now here was Hale, standing beside her and saying everything she'd been too tired or too scared to say. Clara. Mayor Sutton turned to her, his voice taking on a patronizing tone that made her skin crawl. You need to think about your son. about what kind of example you're setting, about what kind of life you're building for him. Is this really what you want? To be known as the woman who shacked up with a drifter? To have people whisper about you? To have your boy grow up hearing what they say about his mother? The words hit like a punch to the gut, because he was right, in a way. People would talk. They already were talking. Eli would hear things, cruel things, things that would hurt him. But then she thought about the past few weeks, about Eli laughing while Hale showed him how to track deer prints in the snow, about her son sleeping through the night without crying for the first time since Thomas died, about the way Eli looked at Hale, not like a stranger, but like someone safe. You want to talk about my son? Claire's voice came out steadier than she felt. Fine. Let's talk about him. For 8 months, he's watched me struggle. He's gone hungry. He's been cold. He's seen me cry when I thought he wasn't looking. He's asked me why no one helps us, and I didn't have an answer that made sense. She took a breath. And then Rowan came. And for the first time since his father died, my son has seen what it looks like when someone shows up. When someone does what they say they'll do. When someone treats us like we matter. That doesn't excuse... I'm not finished. Clara stepped forward, and something in her face made Sutton step back. You want to talk about examples? The example I'm setting is that I won't let fear keep me small, that I won't let other people's opinions dictate how I survive, that when someone offers genuine help, I'm smart enough to take it. And if that makes people whisper, let them. Because my son will grow up knowing his mother fought for him, that she made hard choices to keep him safe and fed and warm, and that's worth more than your approval. Mayor Sutton stared at her, his mouth working but no sound coming out. Sheriff Pierce cleared his throat. Clara, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. You're the ones who rode out here with guns to tell me how to live. She looked at each of them in turn. Now I'm telling you, all of you, to get off my property, and don't come back unless you're ready to treat me with the respect I deserve. You're making a mistake, Sutton said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Then it's mine to make. The mayor looked at Hale, who hadn't moved, hadn't said anything since Claire had started talking, just stood there like a wall. This isn't over, Sutton said. Yeah, it is. Hale's voice was quiet, but absolute. Because the next time you come out here looking for trouble, you'll find it. And I don't think any of you want that. It wasn't a threat exactly, more like a promise. The men mounted their horses slowly, saving face where they could, but they left. And Clara watched them go with something fierce and wild burning in her chest. When they were out of sight, her legs nearly gave out. Hale caught her elbow, steadying her. You all right? I don't know. Her voice shook. I just told the mayor and the sheriff to leave my property. I basically declared war on the whole town. Yeah, you did. There was something like pride in his eyes. That took guts. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. He let go of her arm but didn't step away. For what it's worth, you were right. Every word. Clara looked at him, this man who'd appeared out of nowhere and somehow become essential. They'll make things harder now. They'll refuse to sell to me. They'll turn everyone against me completely. Probably. And you're okay with that? I'm okay with standing beside you while you fight it. Hale's expression was serious. But Clara, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Her heart skipped. What? Why are you doing this, really? Is it because you need my help? Because you're desperate and I'm here? Or is it something more? The question caught her off guard. She'd been so focused on survival, on proving she could make her own choices, that she hadn't stopped to examine what those choices actually meant. I don't know, she said finally. Maybe it started as desperation. But now? She looked toward the cabin, where Eli was still watching from the window. Now it's about building something better than what I had before, and I can't do that alone. You could find someone else, someone the town would accept. I don't want someone else. The words hung between them. Hale studied her face like he was looking for something. Why not? Because... Clara stopped, forcing herself to find the truth. Because you see me, not the widow, not the charity case, not someone to manage or control or fix, just me. And you treat me like I'm capable of making my own decisions, even when they're hard, even when they're risky. She swallowed. I haven't felt like myself in 8 months. But when I'm around you, I remember who I used to be. And I like that person better than the one I've been. Hale was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I need to tell you something. About why I'm here, about who I was before. Clara's stomach tightened. All right. Let's go inside. Eli should hear this too. They gathered in the cabin, Eli sitting at the table with wide eyes while Hale stood by the fire. Clara watched him, trying to prepare herself for whatever was coming. I wasn't lying when I said I drift, Hale began. I've been moving from town to town for about 5 years now, never staying long, never putting down roots. He paused. I do that because I'm running. Not from the law, I haven't broken any laws, but from a past I'd rather forget. What kind of past? Clara asked quietly. I had a family once. A wife. A daughter about Eli's age. His voice stayed level, but Clara saw his hands tighten. We had a small ranch in Montana. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. And I really thought we had time. Time to build something. Time to grow old together. Time for all the things people promise themselves when they're young and stupid. He stopped, staring into the fire. What happened? Eli's small voice broke the silence. Hale looked at the boy. Fever. It came through in winter, and by the time we realized how bad it was too late. My wife died first. Then my daughter 3 days later. And his voice cracked just slightly. I couldn't save them. Couldn't do anything except watch them slip away. Clara felt tears burning her eyes. I buried them on the ranch. Then I sold everything and left. Couldn't stay there. Couldn't look at the place we'd built without seeing ghosts everywhere. Hale turned back to Clara. That's why I drift. Because stopping means thinking, and thinking means remembering, and remembering hurts too much. Then why did you stay here? Clara asked. Why didn't you just keep moving? Because... He stopped, searching for words. Because when I saw you in that store, begging for food while everyone looked away, I saw my wife. Not literally, but the desperation. The pride trying to hold back panic, the knowledge that no one was coming to help. He met her eyes. And I thought, if I'd been there when she needed help, if someone had stepped up when I couldn't, maybe things would have been different. Maybe she'd still be alive. You can't know that. No, but I can make damn sure I don't walk past someone who needs help. Not again. Not ever. He straightened. That's why I stayed. That's why I'm asking to keep staying. Not because I'm trying to replace what I lost. You're not her and Eli's not my daughter, but because helping you helps me remember that I can still do something that matters. That I'm not just a shell moving through the world. The silence that followed was heavy with things unsaid. Eli stood and walked over to Hale. The boy reached out and took the man's hand, holding it tight. I'm sorry your family died, Eli said. That's really sad. Hale looked down at the boy, and Clara saw his throat work. Yeah, it is. But I'm glad you stayed with us. Because you make my mom smile again, and you teach me things, and... Eli's voice got smaller. And I don't feel so scared anymore when you're here. Hale knelt down, bringing himself to Eli's level. You know I can't promise I'll always be here, right? Life doesn't work that way. I know. Eli nodded solemnly. My dad promised he'd always be here too, but he died. So I know promises don't always work. Then I won't make promises I can't keep. Hale put his hand on the boy's shoulder. But I will tell you this. As long as I'm here, I'll do right by you and your mom. I'll work hard. I'll protect you. And I'll never lie to you. That good enough? Eli thought about it, then nodded. Yeah, that's good enough. Hale pulled the boy into a brief hug, then stood, looking at Clara. She didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to process everything she'd just learned. This man had lost everything and was still finding ways to give. Was still choosing to care, even when it hurt. Thank you, she managed, for telling us. You deserve to know. Hale moved toward the door. I'm going to finish the chicken coop. Give you some time to think. About what? About whether this is still what you want, knowing what you know now. He paused at the threshold. I'm damaged goods, Clara. I'm carrying weight that might never get lighter. And if you're tying yourself to me, you should know that. Everyone's carrying something, Clara said. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be honest. And you just were. Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe. Or something close to it. All right then. He stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Eli climbed into Clara's lap, something he hadn't done in months. She held him close, breathing in the scent of his hair. Do you like Mr. Hale, Mama? Yes, sweetheart, I do. Good. Me too. Eli was quiet for a moment. Are we going to be a family? The question cut straight to the heart of everything. Clara thought about the mayor's words, about reputation and propriety and what people would say. She thought about the town's judgment, about the isolation that would only get worse. But then she thought about Hale fixing her roof in the snow, about him teaching Eli to track, about him standing beside her while 6 men tried to intimidate her into submission. She thought about the way he looked at her, not with pity or desire, but with respect, like she was someone worth knowing. I don't know, she told her son honestly, but I think we're building something, and that's enough for now. That night, after Eli was asleep, Clara stepped out onto the porch. Hale sat on the steps, whittling something from a piece of scrap wood. He looked up when she approached. Can't sleep? He asked. Too much on my mind. She sat beside him, leaving space between them. What are you making? He held up a half-finished carving. A horse, small enough to fit in a child's hand. Thought Eli might like it. He will. Clara watched his hands work, steady and sure. Can I ask you something? Always. Why did you tell us about your family? You didn't have to. You could have kept that private. Hale's hand stilled. Because you needed to know what you're getting into, and because... He set down the knife. Because I'm tired of carrying it alone, tired of pretending it doesn't exist, and you asked me to be honest, so I was. It doesn't change anything, Clara said quietly. What you told me. It doesn't make me want you to leave or think less of you. Doesn't make you think more of me either. It does, actually. She looked at him directly. Because you survived something that would have broken most people. And instead of becoming bitter or cruel, you found a way to keep helping. That takes strength. Or cowardice. Can't face my grief, so I run from it. You're not running anymore. Hale met her eyes. No, I'm not. They sat in silence for a while, the night settling around them. Clara could hear coyotes in the distance, the wind through the trees, the quiet sounds of life continuing. The town's going to come after us harder now, she said eventually. After what happened today. Yeah, they will. Are you ready for that? Are you? He countered. Clara thought about it. About the fights ahead, the isolation, the whispers and judgment. About raising Eli in a community that hated her choices. About the risk of everything falling apart. But she also thought about the alternative. Going back to that store and begging, accepting the town's charity on their terms. Letting them control her life in exchange for their approval. I think I am, she said. I think I'm finally ready to stop apologizing for surviving. Hill smiled, small but genuine. Then we'll handle whatever comes. Together? Together. He picked up the knife and went back to carving. But Clara, I need to say something else. Her heart picked up. What? What the mayor said today, about me staying in the barn, about how it looks. Hale kept his eyes on the wood. He wasn't entirely wrong. People are talking, and that talk is going to get worse. It's going to affect you. Affect Eli. I don't care what people say. You should care. Not because they're right, but because words have power. And the longer this goes on without... He stopped, jaw tightening. Without what? Without making it official. Without me having actual standing here. He looked at her then, his gray eyes serious. I'm not saying this right. What I mean is, Clara, if I'm going to be part of this, part of your life and Eli's life, then I want to do it properly. I want people to know I'm not taking advantage, that this isn't temporary. Clara's breath caught. What are you asking? I'm asking... Hale set down the carving and turned to face her fully. I'm asking if you'd consider making this permanent. Not right now, not tomorrow, but eventually, when you're ready, when you're sure. He paused. I'm asking if you'd marry me, Clara. Not out of obligation or convenience, but because you want a partner. Because you want to build something real. The world seemed to tilt. Clara stared at him, her mind racing. This was insane. They'd known each other for weeks, not months or years. She barely knew him beyond what he'd shown her. And yet she'd seen him in ways that mattered, seen his character through action, not words, seen his kindness, his strength, his willingness to stand beside her when everyone else walked away. You don't have to answer now, Hale said quickly. I know it's sudden. I know you need time. I needed you to know that's where I'm heading, that I'm not playing around here, that I'm serious about this. Rowan. His first name felt strange on her tongue, intimate. Don't. He held up his hand. Don't answer until you're certain. I can wait. I'm good at waiting. His mouth quirked. I've been doing it for 5 years. Clara wanted to say yes. The word sat right there, ready. But she knew better than to make decisions in the heat of the moment. Knew that what felt right now might feel different in daylight, with time to think. A month, she heard herself say. Give me a month to be sure, to think about what it means, to make sure I'm choosing this for the right reasons. Fair enough, Hale nodded, relief and something else crossing his face. A month it is. They sat there until the cold drove them inside, and Clara went to bed with her mind spinning, her heart uncertain, and her future suddenly full of possibilities she'd thought were dead and buried with Thomas. The next week brought exactly what Clara had expected. Isolation so complete it felt like exile. Brennan refused to sell to her. When she tried other stores in town, they turned her away with thin excuses and hostile stares. Her mending customers disappeared, the work drying up as if coordinated. Even Mrs. Chen stopped answering her door when Clara knocked. The message was clear. Choose the town or choose Hale. There was no middle ground. Clara chose Hale. He rode to the next town over, 15 miles each way, to buy supplies. He hunted to supplement their food. He found work where he could, odd jobs for ranchers outside town limits who didn't care about the local gossip. And slowly, painfully, they built a life that didn't rely on anyone's approval. Eli's education fell to Clara. She taught him reading and arithmetic at the kitchen table, using Thomas's old books and her own knowledge. It wasn't much, but it was something. And through it all, Hale was there. Not hovering, not taking over, but present. A steady force in the chaos. The month Clara had asked for passed faster than she'd expected. She watched him carefully during that time, looking for cracks in the facade, for signs that the kindness was an act, that the patience was calculated. For any indication that the mayor had been right to warn her, she found nothing but consistency. Hale did what he said he'd do. He showed up when he promised to show up. He treated Eli with gentleness and Clara with respect. He never pushed, never demanded, never expected anything beyond what she was willing to give. And somewhere in those 30 days, Clara stopped being afraid. Not of the town, she was still plenty afraid of what they might do. But afraid of Hale, afraid of making a mistake, afraid of letting someone matter again. That fear faded, replaced by something steadier, something that felt like trust. On the last day of the month, Clara found him in the barn, repairing a broken harness. It's been a month, she said without preamble. Hale looked up, his expression carefully neutral. It has. I've been thinking about what you asked, about what it would mean. And? Clara took a breath. And I think you should know that I'm not the same person I was when Thomas was alive. I'm harder now, more stubborn, less willing to bend or compromise. I've had to fight for every scrap of survival, and it's changed me. I know. And I think you should know that I can't promise to love you the way I loved him. That kind of love, it came from years of building together, of growing up side by side. I don't know if I have that in me anymore. I'm not asking for that. Then what are you asking for? Hale set down the harness and stood, crossing to where she stood in the doorway. I'm asking for partnership, for honesty, for someone to stand beside while we both try to build something worth keeping. I'm asking for a chance to prove that trust doesn't have to come all at once. It can grow slow, like crops. And I'm asking, he paused, I'm asking you to believe that what we have now, imperfect and complicated as it is enough to start with. Clara looked at him, this man who'd lost everything and still found a way to offer her a future. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I'll marry you. Hale's eyes widened slightly, like he'd prepared himself for rejection. You're sure? As sure as I can be about anything. She stepped closer. I don't know if this will work. I don't know if we can make it, but I know I'd rather try with you than play it safe alone. That's all I need to hear." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand, his calluses rough against her palm. "We'll do this right. We'll find someone to marry us proper, and we'll make damn sure the town knows this is real." "They won't accept it." "They don't have to. We just have to accept each other." He squeezed her hand gently. "When do you want to do this?" Clara thought about it, about logistics and timing and practicalities, but underneath all that she felt something else. Urgency. A sense that they'd waited long enough, fought hard enough, earned this. "Soon," she said, "before winter settles in for good, before anything else can go wrong." "All right." Hale smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Soon it is." They stood there in the barn, hands clasped, while outside the wind picked up and the first snow of December started to fall. And Clara felt something she hadn't felt in 8 months. Hope. Finding someone to perform the ceremony proved harder than Clara expected. The minister in town refused outright, citing concerns about propriety and the speed of the courtship. 2 other clergy in neighboring towns gave similar excuses, their eyes sliding away from Clara's as they spoke. She could feel the town's influence reaching beyond its borders, poisoning any chance they had at a traditional wedding. "There's a justice of the peace in Millbrook," Hale said one evening, studying the map spread across the kitchen table. 20 miles north. "I worked for him once, fixing his barn. He's fair-minded, doesn't care much about gossip." "Will he marry us?" "Only one way to find out." They rode out 3 days later, leaving Eli with Mrs. Chen, who'd finally opened her door after Clara slipped a note under it explaining everything. The older woman had hugged her tight, whispering that she understood what it meant to choose survival over approval. The journey took most of the day. Hale rode ahead on his roan while Clara followed on the mare he'd bought her the week before, a gentle bay with a white star on her forehead. The cold bit through Clara's coat, but the sky stayed clear, and for a few hours she let herself pretend they were just 2 people riding through beautiful country, unburdened by judgment or fear. Justice William Porter lived in a modest house on the edge of Millbrook. He answered the door himself, a thin man in his 60s with sharp eyes and ink-stained fingers. "Hale!" Porter's face creased into a smile. "Didn't expect to see you again. Thought you'd moved on." "I had. Then I found a reason to stay put." Hale gestured to Clara. "This is Clara Whitlock. We're hoping you can marry us." Porter's eyebrows rose. "That's so. Come in then. Let's talk." They sat in his cramped study while Porter made coffee and asked questions. Not prying questions, but practical ones. How long had they known each other? Did Clara understand what she was agreeing to? Did Hale have means to support a family? Clara answered honestly, and Porter listened without judgment, occasionally making notes on a scrap of paper. "Your town know about this?" he asked finally. "They know," Clara said. "They don't approve. I gathered that from the fact you rode 20 miles to see me instead of using your own minister." Porter leaned back in his chair. "I won't lie to you, Mrs. Whitlock. Marrying quickly after a husband's death, it raises eyebrows. People talk. And from what Hale's told me about your situation, you've got enough people talking already." "I know. So why do it? Why not wait a year, let things settle, do this proper when the town's forgotten about the fuss?" Clara thought about the question, about all the practical reasons to wait, to be cautious, to let time prove what actions couldn't. "Because I'm tired of living my life based on what other people think is proper," she said. "I've spent 8 months trying to earn approval I'll never get, and in that time I've learned that survival doesn't wait for permission, neither does happiness." She looked at Hale, then back at Porter. "I'm not marrying him to scandalize anyone. I'm marrying him because he's the best thing that's happened to me since my world fell apart, and I'm not willing to waste time pretending otherwise." Porter studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. When do you want to do this?" "Today, if you're willing." "Today?" Porter glanced at Hale. "You're both sure?" "We're sure," Hale said quietly. Porter stood, moving to a cabinet and pulling out a leather-bound book. "All right then. Let's make it official, but I'll need witnesses. Law requires 2. "I can get my neighbor," Porter said, "and her daughter. They're discreet. Won't spread gossip. An hour later, Clara stood in Porter's small parlor wearing the same dress she'd worn to town that morning. Nothing special, just wool and practicality. Hale had cleaned up as best he could, but he still looked like what he was, a working man in borrowed circumstances. Porter's neighbor, Mrs. Yates, and her daughter Hannah stood witness. They were kind-faced women who asked no questions and offered quiet congratulations. The ceremony itself was brief. No flowers, no music, no gathering of family and friends, just words spoken in a room that smelled of wood smoke and old paper. Porter read from his book, his voice steady. Do you, Clara Whitlock, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health? Clara's throat tightened. The last time she'd spoken these words, she'd been 19 and full of certainty about the future. Now she was 27 and certain of nothing except that standing still meant dying slowly. I do. Porter turned to Hale. And do you, Rowan Hale, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health? Hale looked at Clara, his gray eyes steady. I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife. Porter closed the book. You may kiss your bride, if you're so inclined. Hale hesitated, glancing at Clara. She nodded slightly, and he leaned in, pressing his lips to hers in a kiss that was gentle and brief, and somehow more meaningful than any grand gesture could have been. When he pulled back, Clara felt something shift inside her, a sense of finality, of commitment, of stepping off a cliff and hoping the ground would hold. Porter handed them the marriage certificate, the ink still wet. Congratulations, and good luck. You're going to need it. They rode back as the sun set, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of gold and pink. Clara kept touching the folded paper in her coat pocket, making sure it was real. You all right? Hale asked. I think so. Clara looked at him, her husband now, strange as that felt. Are you? Better than I've been in 5 years. They rode in comfortable silence after that, and Clara realized something. She wasn't afraid. Not of what they'd just done, not of what came next. She'd made her choice, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt like she was moving toward something instead of just running away. When they reached Mrs. Chen's house to collect Eli, the older woman took one look at them and smiled. You did it. We did, Clara confirmed. Good. Mrs. Chen squeezed her hand. Now go home and start your life, and don't let the bastards grind you down. Clara laughed despite herself. I won't. Eli was asleep when they got him home, exhausted from playing with Mrs. Chen's cats. Hale carried the boy to bed while Clara started a fire, and when he came back out, they stood together in the kitchen, newly married and suddenly uncertain about what happened next. I can still sleep in the barn, Hale offered. If you want time to adjust. Clara shook her head. No, we're married. We do this properly. She paused. But maybe we take it slow. As slow as you need. That night, they shared the bed in the small bedroom for the first time. They didn't touch beyond the space their bodies occupied, both staying carefully on their own sides. But Clara could hear him breathing in the darkness, could feel the warmth he generated, and it was strange and comforting all at once. Rowan? She whispered. Yeah? Thank you. For being patient with me. For not expecting more than I can give right now. Clara, you've given me more than you know. You've given me a reason to stop running. That's enough. She fell asleep to the sound of his breathing, and for the first time since Thomas died, she didn't wake up crying. The town found out within 3 days. Clara wasn't sure how. Maybe Mrs. Yates had talked despite Porter's assurances, or maybe someone had seen them riding back. But word spread like wildfire, and the reaction was swift and brutal. Mayor Sutton showed up personally, his face purple with rage. You got married? He didn't bother with pleasantries. Without telling anyone? Without asking your permission? Clara crossed her arms. She stood on her porch, Hale visible through the window behind her. I'm a grown woman, Mayor. I don't need permission to marry. You need sense, which you clearly don't have. Sutton stepped closer, lowering his voice. Do you understand what you've done? You've humiliated this town, made us all look like fools. I got married to a good man. That's all I did. You married a stranger, a drifter, And you did it indecently fast, which makes it look like—" He stopped, jaw working. "Like what? Like I'm pregnant? Like he had to marry me?" Clara's voice hardened. "Say it, Mayor. Say what you're really thinking." "I'm thinking you've made a mockery of decent behavior, and now everyone's going to pay for it. The only one making a mockery of anything is you, standing on my porch and insulting my husband." Clara stepped forward. "Now get off my property before I have Rowan remove you." Sutton's eyes flicked to the window where Hale stood. "This isn't over, Clara. It never is with you people." She turned to go inside, then stopped. "Oh, and Mayor, my name's not Clara Whitlock anymore. It's Clara Hale. You might want to remember that." She shut the door in his face. Inside, Hale was grinning. "Clara Hale. That's the first time you've said it out loud. It's going to take some getting used to." She leaned against the door, her heart pounding. "I just made things worse, didn't I?" "Probably, but it felt good, right?" Despite everything, Clara smiled. "Yeah, it really did." The consequences came faster than expected. The general store put up a sign, "No service to Hale household." Other businesses followed suit. The feed store, the butcher, even the post office started losing their mail. Hale took it in stride, finding suppliers in other towns, bartering with ranchers who didn't care about local politics. But it was hard work, time-consuming, and expensive. And winter wasn't making it any easier. Then the Garrisons came. It was early morning, barely light, when Clara heard the noise outside. She looked out to see James and Robert Garrison taking down the fence Hale had built around the garden. She ran out without thinking, Hale close behind. "What the hell are you doing?" she shouted. James Garrison looked up, his face hard. "Reclaiming what's ours." "That's my fence. On my property." "Nope." Robert held up a piece of paper. "Says here your property line ends 20 feet east of where you think it does. This fence is on public land, so we're removing it." "That's a lie. It's a survey. Official and legal." James yanked another post out of the ground. "Maybe if you hadn't pissed off the whole town, someone would have mentioned the boundary issue before we had to take action." Hale moved forward, his face dangerous. "Put the fence back." "Or what? You'll hit us?" "Go ahead. Give the sheriff another reason to lock you up." Robert grinned. "Oh, wait. I forgot. You're respectable now, married and everything. Can't go around beating people up when you've got a family to think about." Clara saw Hale's hands ball into fists, saw the rage barely contained. She put her hand on his arm. "Don't. That's what they want. They're stealing from us." "I know, but fighting them gives them ammunition." She turned to the Garrisons. "Take the fence. Take whatever you want. But know that every petty thing you do just proves you're scared of us. Scared that we're making it work despite everything you've thrown at us." "We're not scared of you," James spat. "We're disgusted. You're a disgrace to this town, and he's—" "Careful." Hale's voice dropped to something lethal. "Finish that sentence and see what happens." The brothers exchanged glances, then went back to work without another word. Clara and Hale watched as they dismantled the fence piece by piece, loading it onto a wagon. When they were done, James tipped his hat mockingly. "Have a nice day, Mrs. Hale. Hope the cold doesn't get to your garden before spring." They drove off, leaving destruction in their wake. Clara stood looking at the exposed garden, the months of work undone in minutes. She felt Hale's hand on her shoulder. "I'll build another one," he said quietly. "Further in. Make sure it's on our land." "It's not about the fence." Clara's voice shook. "It's about them winning, about them hurting us and getting away with it." "They didn't win. They just showed everyone what kind of people they are." Hale turned her to face him. "And we show what kind of people we are by not becoming them, by building something better. I'm tired of being better. I'm tired of taking the high road while they roll around in the mud." "I know." He pulled her close, and she let herself lean against him. "But we keep going anyway, because the alternative is giving up. And I don't think either of us knows how to do that." He was right, of course, but that didn't make it easier. Over the next few weeks, more small attacks came. Tools went missing from the barn. Someone shot at their chickens, killing 3. Their well was fouled with dead animals, forcing Hale to spend 2 days cleaning it out. Each incident was small enough to deny, big enough to hurt, and the sheriff did nothing, claiming lack of evidence and suggesting maybe they'd made enemies through their own behavior. But through it all, Hale worked. He repaired what was broken, replaced what was destroyed, found ways to keep them moving forward. And Clara watched him, seeing the strain it took, the exhaustion he tried to hide. "We should leave," she said one night. "Just pack up and go somewhere else. Start fresh where people don't know us." Hale looked up from the harness he was mending. "Is that what you want?" "I want you to stop having to fight every single day just to keep us fed. Fighting's part of life. You can't run from it." "You did. You ran for 5 years." The words came out harsher than she meant them. Hale set down the harness slowly. "You're right. I did run. And it didn't fix anything. It just made me hollow." He met her eyes. "I'm not running anymore, Clara. Not from this. Not from you. Not from the life we're building. But if you want to leave, if this is too much, then we'll leave. I'll follow you wherever you want to go." Clara felt tears burn her eyes. "I don't want to leave. I just want it to stop being so hard." "I know." He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "But it will get better. These people, they'll get tired eventually. Find someone else to torment, and we'll still be here, stronger than before." "How can you be so sure?" "Because we're still here now. And that means something." She held on to him, drawing strength from his certainty, even when her own was failing. The turning point came in February. A storm rolled in, fierce and fast, dumping 3 feet of snow in 2 days. Claire and Hale worked around the clock, keeping the animals fed, the paths clear, the cabin warm. Eli helped where he could, carrying wood and water until his small arms shook with exhaustion. On the 3rd day, they heard someone calling from the road. Hale grabbed his rifle and went out. Clara followed, holding Eli back. A man stood knee-deep in snow, his horse struggling behind him. Even from a distance, Clara could see he was in bad shape, shaking, pale, his lips blue with cold. "Please," the man called out. "I need help. My wife. She's having a baby. Can't make it to town in this. Need someone who knows." He stumbled, catching himself on his horse's neck. Hale lowered the rifle. "Where is she?" "Mile back, cabin. Please, she's in bad shape." Clara recognized him then. Samuel Brennan, the store owner who'd refused them service for months. Hale recognized him too. She could see it in the way his jaw tightened, his grip on the rifle shifting. "Please," Brennan said again, and this time his voice broke. "I know I got no right to ask, know what I've done. But my wife, she didn't do anything. She's just scared and hurting, and I don't know what to do." Clara stepped forward. "I'll come." Hale turned to her. "Yeah, Clara, I've delivered babies before. Helped the midwife back in Nebraska." She looked at Brennan. "Get me there and I'll do what I can." Relief flooded Brennan's face. "Thank you. Thank you. Don't thank me yet." Clara went inside to gather supplies, clean cloth, hot water in a canteen, the few medical supplies she had. When she came back out, Hale was already saddling the horses. "I'm coming with you," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. They followed Brennan through the storm, fighting wind and snow every step. The cabin appeared like a ghost through the white, small, and dark. Inside, they found Sarah Brennan lying on a bed, her face slicked with sweat despite the cold. She was young, maybe 20, and terrified. "It's too early," she gasped. "The baby's not supposed to come yet." Clara moved to her side, checking her over with practiced hands. "How early?" 6 weeks. Maybe 7. That wasn't good. Premature babies often didn't survive, especially in winter, especially this far from a real doctor. But Clara kept her face neutral. "All right, let's see what we're working with." The next 4 hours were a blur of blood and pain and desperate hope. Clara worked with everything she knew, everything she'd learned watching the midwife, everything instinct told her to try. Hale helped where he could, following her instructions without question, and Brennan paced in the corner, useless with fear. Finally, near midnight, a thin cry cut through the cabin. The baby was small, terrifyingly small, but alive. A girl, pink and angry and fighting. Clara wrapped her in the warmest cloth she could find and handed her to Sarah, who sobbed with relief. "She's early, so she'll need extra care," Clara said, exhaustion making her words slow. "Keep her warm, feed her often, watch for breathing trouble or fever." "Will she make it?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide. "I don't know, but she's got a good start." Clara stood, her back screaming. "I'll come back tomorrow if the storm clears. Check on her." "You don't have to sit." Yes, I do. Clara looked at the baby, so small and fragile. She deserves every chance, and you deserve help. Brennan followed them outside as they prepared to leave. Mrs. Hale, he said quietly, I don't know how to thank you. You could start by treating me like a human being. Clara's voice was flat. You could stop refusing me service, stop spreading rumors, stop making my life hell because you don't approve of my choices. Brennan flinched. You're right. Everything you said, He stopped, searching for words. I've been cruel. Thought I was protecting the town's values, but really I was just being small and mean. And you didn't have to help tonight. Had every reason to tell me to go to hell, but you came anyway. I didn't do it for you. I did it for your wife and baby. They didn't hurt me. I know. Brennan looked at the cabin, then back at her. But I'm begging. If there's any way I can make this right, tell me how. Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Sell to me. No credit. I'll pay cash like everyone else. But stop treating me like I'm invisible. Done. And Brennan hesitated. I'll talk to the others. Tell them what you did tonight. Maybe it'll change some minds. Maybe. Clara didn't sound hopeful. But do it because it's right, not because you owe me. She and Hale rode home through the dying storm, arriving just before dawn. Clara was so tired she could barely stand, but Hale caught her as she slid from the saddle. You did good tonight, he said. We'll see if the baby makes it. Either way, you gave her a chance. That's more than most would have done. Clara leaned against him, too exhausted to stand on her own. I keep thinking about what the mayor said, about me humiliating the town, about being a disgrace. What about it? I saved that baby tonight, saved Sarah Brennan's life maybe, and I did it while being a disgrace, while being improper and scandalous and everything they say I am. She looked up at him. So what does that make them? Small, Hale said simply. It makes them small. The baby survived. Clara visited 3 times over the next week, checking on the tiny girl they'd named Mercy. Each time, Sarah greeted her with tears and gratitude, and each time, Samuel Brennan looked more ashamed. True to his word, he talked to people, told them what Clara had done, how she'd ridden through a blizzard to help someone who'd treated her like dirt. The response was mixed. Some people softened, started nodding to her in the street again. Others doubled down on their judgment, claiming she was just trying to buy her way back into good graces. But something had shifted. The attacks stopped. The harassment faded. And while the town didn't welcome her back with open arms, they stopped actively trying to destroy her. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even acceptance. But it was a cessation of hostilities, and that was something. Brennan wants to talk to you, Clara told Hale one evening in March. The snow was finally melting, turning everything to mud. Says he has a proposal. What kind of proposal? Didn't say, but he asked us to come to the store tomorrow. Hale looked skeptical, but agreed. They rode into town the next day, Clara's stomach tight with nerves. But when they entered the store, Brennan greeted them almost warmly. Mr. and Mrs. Hale, thank you for coming. He gestured to the back room. Can we talk in private? They followed him into a cramped office filled with ledgers and receipts. Brennan cleared space on a chair for Clara, then stood awkwardly. I've been thinking about what you said about making things right. He pulled out a folder. I talked to some people, ranchers mostly, folks who don't care about town politics. And I learned something interesting. You've been doing work for them. Good work, fast and reliable. Hale nodded slowly. That's right. They also told me you're good with horses, training, breaking, general care. Brennan looked between them. I need someone like that. Had a man who handled livestock sales, but he moved east last month. Job's been empty since. Clara felt her heart pick up. You're offering Hale a job? I am. Regular wages, steady work. You'd handle horse sales and training, maybe help with transport between towns. Brennan met Hale's eyes. I know I got no right to ask after everything, but it's a good job and you'd be good at it. And it would give you standing in town, make you more than just a drifter, Hale finished. Yeah. Hale was quiet for a long moment. Clara could see him thinking, weighing the offer against pride and memory. What would the mayor say? Hale asked finally. The mayor doesn't run my business. I do. Brennan's voice firmed. And after watching my daughter almost die while you and your wife saved her, I stopped caring what the mayor thinks about anything. Hale looked at Clara. She gave him a small nod. All right, Hale said. I'll try it. But if there's trouble, if people make it difficult, I walk. Deal? Deal. Brennan stuck out his hand. Hale shook it, and Clara felt something release in her chest. This wasn't charity. This was earned. Hale had proven himself through action, through skill, through being exactly who he was. And now he had a future that didn't depend on odd jobs and scraps. They walked out of the store into spring sunshine, and for the first time since this whole thing started, Clara felt like they might actually make it. You're smiling, Hale observed. I am, Clara confirmed. It feels strange. Good strange? Yeah, good strange. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. We're going to be all right, aren't we? I think we already are. Hale squeezed her hand. We survived the worst of it. Everything else is just details. They rode home together, and Clara looked at the land stretching out before them. Still hard, still unforgiving, but theirs. They'd fought for it, bled for it, refused to let anyone take it from them. And now they got to keep it. Spring arrived slowly that year, fighting winter for every inch of ground. But it came, bringing mud and green shoots and the possibility that maybe survival could turn into something more. Hale started work at Brennan's store the first week of April. Clara watched him ride out each morning, his shoulders straight, his movements purposeful. He came home tired but satisfied, smelling of horses and leather and honest work. The money helped, not a lot. Brennan wasn't generous with wages, but enough that Clara could buy supplies without counting every penny. Enough that she could think about things beyond immediate survival. I want to expand the garden, she told Hale one evening. They sat on the porch watching Eli practice the tracking skills Hale had taught him. The boy crouched low, studying deer prints in the softening ground. Plant more than just vegetables. Maybe some flowers. Something that isn't purely practical. Hale looked at her, surprised. Flowers? I know it sounds foolish. It doesn't sound foolish. He leaned back against the post, considering. Sounds like you're thinking past survival. That's good. Is it? Or is it tempting fate? Can't live your whole life waiting for the other shoe to drop, Clara. Sometimes you have to plant flowers just to prove you believe in summer. She smiled at that, tucking the words away like seeds to examine later. The town's attitude shifted gradually, like ice breaking up on a river. It started with small things. Mrs. Talbot nodded to Clara in the street instead of crossing to avoid her. The Hendersons finally made good on their promise of work, hiring Clara to sew curtains for their new house. Even the teacher, Miss Brennan, approached Clara one afternoon with a proposition. I heard you've been teaching Eli at home, she said, her voice stiff with residual disapproval, but making the effort anyway. He could come back to school, if you wanted. Clara thought about it, about the social interaction Eli was missing, the structured learning, the normalcy of sitting in a classroom with other children. Would the other children be kind to him? She asked bluntly. Miss Brennan's face tightened. I can't control what children say to each other outside my classroom, but inside it I run a tight ship. No cruelty tolerated. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give. Miss Brennan met her eyes. But I can tell you this, your boy's been the talk of every household with children in it. How he helped save that baby. How he's learned to track and hunt at 7 years old. How he carries himself. Children respect that, even if their parents are still clutching pearls over your choices. Clara considered. Then she called Eli over. Miss Brennan says you can come back to school. Do you want to? Eli looked between them, his young face serious. Will they be mean about you and Mr. Hale? Some might. What should I say if they are? Clara crouched down to his level. You tell them the truth. That Hale is a good man who takes care of us. That we're a family. And that what other people think doesn't change what's true. Eli nodded slowly. Okay, I'll go back. I'll go. He started the following Monday. Clara watched him walk toward the schoolhouse, his small back straight, and felt her heart twist. But when he came home that afternoon, he was smiling. How was it? She asked. Tommy Hewitt said his dad says you're a word I'm not supposed to repeat. But then Sarah Morrison told him to shut up because you saved her baby sister. And then we played marbles, and I won. Clara pulled him into a hug, blinking back tears. Her son was learning to navigate a world that judged him for circumstances beyond his control. It wasn't fair, but at least he was learning he could navigate it. The real test came in May. Mayor Sutton called a town meeting to discuss community standards and moral conduct. Everyone knew it was really about Clara and Hale. The whole town showed up, packing into the meeting hall until people stood shoulder to shoulder. Clara and Hale arrived together. The crowd parted to let them through, some faces hostile, others curious, a few sympathetic. They sat in the back, Hale's hand resting on Clara's knee in quiet support. Sutton stood at the front, his face grave. We're here tonight to address a situation that's been dividing this community, a situation that challenges our values and our sense of what's proper. Here we go, Hale muttered. Mrs. Clara Whitlock, excuse me, Mrs. Hale, has made choices that many of us find troubling. Marrying quickly after her husband's death, choosing a man with no roots, no history in our community, living in a manner that some would call unseemly. Clara felt heat rising in her face, but she kept quiet. Hale's hand tightened on her knee. However, Sutton's voice shifted. Recent events have forced me to reconsider some of my positions. Mrs. Hale saved Sarah Brennan and her child during that February storm. She did so without hesitation, despite how this town has treated her. That action speaks to character in ways that gossip and judgment cannot. Clara blinked. This wasn't going the direction she'd expected. I've also learned that Mr. Hale has proven himself a reliable worker and a man of his word. He's helped several ranchers with problems they couldn't solve themselves. He's earned respect through action, not words. Sutton paused, looking directly at Clara and Hale. I don't agree with the speed of your marriage. I think you should have waited, should have considered appearances more carefully, but I can no longer in good conscience claim you're a danger to this town's moral fabric. If anything, you've shown more morality than some who were born here. The crowd murmured, some in agreement, others in angry dissent. Sheriff Pierce stood. With respect, Mayor, are we really going to pretend everything's fine, that we should just accept? I'm not saying accept. Sutton cut him off. I'm saying tolerate. There's a difference. Mrs. Hale has proven she can survive without our approval. She's proven her husband isn't the threat we feared. And she's proven that maybe, just maybe, we were too quick to judge. Daniel Garrett spoke up from the middle of the room. What are you proposing? I'm proposing we stop the harassment, stop the petty attacks, let them live their lives and we live ours. If they fail, it won't be because we sabotage them. And if they succeed, Sutton's mouth quirked slightly. Well, then perhaps we'll learn something about the difference between propriety and decency. The debate raged for another hour. Some people argued passionately that Clara had violated moral standards beyond redemption. Others pointed out that she'd done nothing illegal, nothing that warranted continued persecution. In the end, they voted. Not on whether to approve of Clara and Hale, that wasn't on the table, but on whether to officially end the town's informal campaign against them. The vote passed. Barely. But it passed. As people filed out, several approached Clara, some to apologize, others to explain they'd never agreed with the treatment she'd received, still others to warn her that this didn't mean forgiveness. Clara took it all with quiet dignity, thanking those who deserved thanks and ignoring those who didn't. Samuel Brennan was one of the last to approach. I know what I said up there doesn't erase what happened, but I meant it. You saved my family, and I won't forget that. I didn't do it for credit. I know. That's why it matters. He hesitated. My wife wants to thank you properly. Would you come for dinner? You and your family? Clara glanced at Hale, who shrugged slightly. Your choice. All right, she said. We'll come. They walked home under a sky full of stars, Eli between them holding both their hands. Did we win? The boy asked. There's no winning, Clara said. Just surviving with dignity and tact. Is that the same thing? Sometimes, Hale said. Sometimes it's better. The dinner at the Brennans' house was awkward at first. Sarah was nervous, Samuel overly formal, and their baby Mercy cried through the first course. But gradually, conversation found its rhythm. They talked about horses and gardens and the challenges of raising children in harsh country. They talked about loss and hope and the strange ways life forced people to grow. As they were leaving, Sarah pulled Clara aside. I was one of them, she said quietly. One of the people who whispered about you, who judged you for taking help from a stranger, and then you saved my life anyway. You didn't have to. You had every reason to let me suffer. I'm not built that way. I know. That's what makes you better than me. Sarah's eyes filled. I'm trying to be better, to raise Mercy to be better, to teach her that kindness matters more than appearances. Clara squeezed her hand. Then you're already doing it. As spring turned to summer, Clara's garden flourished. Not just the vegetables, but the flowers she'd planted. Wild roses and black-eyed Susans and clusters of purple asters. They served no practical purpose, produced nothing to eat or sell, but they made the space beautiful, and beauty mattered in ways Clara was only beginning to understand. Hale built a fence around the whole property, this time making absolutely sure of the boundary lines. He worked on it in the evenings after his shifts at the store, Eli helping where he could. It took 3 weeks, but when it was finished, it stood solid and true. A physical declaration that this land was theirs and they intended to keep it. Clara took in more sewing work, her reputation for fine craftsmanship spreading to neighboring towns. The money wasn't much, but combined with Hale's wages, it meant security. Real security, not the fragile kind that depended on weather, or luck, or other people's goodwill. They bought 3 chickens to replace the ones that had been killed. Then a milk cow. Then a second horse so Clara could make supply runs without borrowing Hale's roan. Piece by piece, they built a life that looked less like survival and more like living. But it wasn't perfect. It never would be. Some people in town still refused to speak to Clara. The Garrison brothers continued their cold hostility, though they stopped the outright attacks. And there were moments, usually late at night when Clara couldn't sleep, when doubt crept in like frost through cracks. Had she made the right choice? Was Hale really the man he seemed, or was she fooling herself? What if he left? What if she'd bet everything on someone who'd eventually disappoint her? She mentioned these fears to Hale one night in early July. They sat outside in the cooling air, watching heat lightning flash on the horizon. You ever regret it? She asked. Marrying me? Taking on a ready-made family? Hale was quiet for a moment. Sometimes I wonder if you got a fair deal. You married a broken man carrying ghosts. That's not what anyone dreams of. You didn't answer the question. No, I don't regret it. He looked at her, his face serious in the dim light. But I worry I'm not enough, that someday you'll wake up and realize you deserved better. We both carry ghosts, Rowan. Mine just have different names than yours. Clara reached for his hand. But here's what I've figured out. Nobody gets a perfect partner. Nobody gets a life without complications. The question isn't whether we're broken. It's whether we're willing to keep showing up anyway. Are you willing to keep showing up? Every day so far. She squeezed his hand. Ask me again tomorrow, and I'll probably say the same thing. That's all anyone can promise, I guess. One day at a time. They sat in comfortable silence after that, watching the lightning paint the sky. In August, 2 significant things happened. First, Brennan offered Hale a partnership in the livestock side of the business. Not full ownership, Brennan wasn't that generous, but a percentage of profits and a say in decisions. It meant more money, more stability, more proof that Hale had become an integral part of the town's economy. Hale came home that evening with the contract in his hand and disbelief on his face. He wants to make me a partner. Clara read the terms carefully, checking for traps or unreasonable conditions. But it was straightforward, honest business with fair terms. Are you going to accept? I don't know. It means staying, really staying, putting down roots so deep I can't pull them up if things go bad. Is that what scares you? That things might go bad? Part of it? Hale sat down heavily. But mostly I'm scared of wanting it too much, of believing this is real and then having it ripped away like everything else I've cared about. Clara understood that fear intimately. It lived in her chest too, a constant whisper that happiness was temporary and trust was foolish. We could spend our whole lives protecting ourselves from hurt, she said slowly. Keep everything at arm's length so it can't wound us when it ends. But that's not living, Rowan. That's just existing. And I'm tired of existing. What are you saying? I'm saying sign the contract, take the risk. Build something that matters, even knowing it might not last. She met his eyes. Because the alternative is staying frozen in fear. And I've tried that. It doesn't work. Haley signed the contract the next day. The second thing that happened was that Clara discovered she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks but hadn't wanted to acknowledge it, hadn't wanted to add another complication to an already complicated situation. But when she finally confirmed it, missed cycles, morning nausea, a certain tenderness, she couldn't deny it anymore. She told Hale that night after Eli went to bed. He stared at her, processing. "You're sure? As sure as I can be without a doctor. And how do you feel about it?" Clara had been asking herself the same question since she'd figured it out. Scared, excited, worried about what people will say, even though they don't get a vote. Worried about the birth, about money, about whether we're ready. She paused. But also happy. Is that strange? No. Hale's face softened. It's not strange at all. He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. Clara felt him trembling slightly and realized he was crying. "Hey!" She pulled back to look at him. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. His voice caught. "I didn't think I'd get this again. A family, a child, a future." He wiped his eyes roughly. "After I lost them, I thought that part of my life was over. And now you get another chance," Clara finished. "Yeah, and I'm terrified I'll mess it up." "You won't." She said it with certainty she didn't entirely feel but needed him to hear. "You're already a good father to Eli. You'll be good for this one too." They told Eli the next morning. The boy's reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. "I'm going to have a brother?" "Or a sister," Clara corrected. "Can we name it after a horse?" "Absolutely not." Eli thought about it. "Can I teach it to track?" "When it's old enough, yes." "Then I don't care if it's a brother or sister." Eli beamed. "This is great." His simple acceptance made Clara's heart ache with love. The town found out within a week. Small communities had no secrets. The response was mixed, but mostly positive. A pregnant woman was respectable in ways a scandalous marriage wasn't. It legitimized Clara and Hale's union in the eyes of people who needed that legitimization. Some whispered about timing, counting months and making assumptions. But Clara had learned to let that noise wash over her without sticking. Sarah Brennan brought by a basket of baby clothes Mercy had outgrown. Mrs. Chen gifted them a beautiful cradle she'd been saving. Even Miss Brennan, who still maintained a certain frosty distance, sent a note of congratulation. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Clara was sick for the first 3 months, exhausted for the next 3. But Hale adjusted his schedule to help more around the house, and Eli took on responsibilities beyond his years, and they managed. The baby was born in January during a cold snap that made the February storm look mild. Mrs. Chen served as midwife, with Sarah Brennan assisting and Hale pacing outside like a caged animal. It was a boy, healthy, loud, with a shock of dark hair and his father's gray eyes. They named him Thomas, after Clara's first husband. Hale suggested it without hesitation, and Clara loved him even more for understanding what that gesture meant. When she handed the baby to Hale, watching this hard man cradle new life with infinite gentleness, Clara felt something click into place. This was her family, imperfect, assembled from broken pieces, built on foundation of pain and loss and desperate choices. But it was hers, and it was real. Eli was fascinated by his baby brother, hovering close and asking endless questions. "Why is he so red? When can he walk? Can I teach him to track now?" "He's a day old, sweetheart. Give him time." "How much time?" "Years." Eli looked disappointed, but accepted it with the resilience of childhood. The town celebrated the birth in small ways. Gifts appeared on their porch: food, clothing, blankets. People who'd been coldly polite became warmly congratulatory. A baby did that, Clara realized. Softened edges and reminded people of what mattered. Mayor Sutton even stopped by, though he looked uncomfortable the entire visit. "Congratulations," he said stiffly. "Fine-looking boy." "Thank you." "I know we've had our differences, Mrs. Hale, but I want you to know what you've built here. Against all odds, it's impressive. Not everyone could have done it." Clara studied him. "Is that an apology?" "It's an acknowledgement." Sutton shifted his weight. "I was wrong about some things. Not everything. I still think you moved too fast, took unnecessary risks. But I was wrong to try to punish you for making choices I didn't approve of. That wasn't my place." It wasn't the apology Clara wanted, but it was what he could offer, and she'd learned to take what was available. "Thank you for saying that." Sutton nodded and left quickly, as if staying longer might require more honesty than he could manage. Spring came again, Clara's second spring in this new life. Thomas was 3 months old and starting to smile. Eli was 8 and reading at a level that made Miss Brennan grudgingly admit he might be the brightest student she'd ever taught. And Hale's partnership with Brennan was thriving, bringing in enough money that they'd started talking about adding a room to the cabin. Clara worked in her garden, Thomas sleeping in a basket beside her while she planted seeds. Her body was different now, marked by pregnancy and birth, carrying weight it hadn't before. But it was strong, capable. It had survived things that should have broken it. She heard horses and looked up to see Daniel Garrett riding in with another man she didn't recognize. Clara stood slowly, wiping dirt from her hands. "Mr. Garrett." "Mrs. Hale." Garrett dismounted. "This is James Morrison. He's looking to buy property in the area. Asked me to show him around." "And you brought him here because?" "Because he asked about success stories. People who've made it work in hard conditions." Garrett gestured at the cabin, the barn, the garden, the fence. "This land was barely holding on a year ago. Now look at it." Morrison stepped forward, his expression appraising. "You've done well here. Built something solid." "My husband and I have, yes." "I heard the story. Widow marries a drifter, town turns against them. They survive anyway." Morrison smiled. "That takes guts and grit, the kind of qualities this territory needs." Clara didn't know what to say to that. She'd never thought of their story as inspiring. It had just been survival. "What Mr. Morrison is getting at," Garrett said, "is that you've become an example. Proof that people can start over. That second chances work." "Sometimes they work," Clara corrected. "Sometimes they don't. We got lucky." "Luck is part of it," Morrison agreed, "but so is character. And from what I've seen and heard, you've got that in abundance." After they left, Clara stood looking at the land they'd fought so hard to keep. She thought about that first winter, standing in Brennan's store with nothing but pride and desperation. Thought about Hale stepping forward when no one else would. Thought about every choice since, the hard ones, the risky ones, the ones that had seemed impossible at the time. They'd built this, not perfectly, not smoothly, but they'd built it anyway, piece by stubborn piece. Hale came home that evening to find Clara sitting on the porch with both boys, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. "You look thoughtful," he said, settling beside her. "I was thinking about where we started, where we are now." And I think maybe we did something worth doing, made something worth keeping." Hale pulled her close, Thomas nestled between them, and Eli leaning against his other side. They sat like that as darkness fell. A family assembled from fragments but whole in the ways that mattered. "You know what I learned?" Clara said quietly. "People will always judge. They'll always have opinions about what you should do, how you should live, who you should trust. And you can spend your whole life trying to earn their approval, sacrificing pieces of yourself to fit their expectations. Or you can make your own choices and accept the consequences. Which way's better? See, the second one. It's harder, lonelier, more painful in the short term. But at least it's yours. At least you can look at what you've built and know you did it your way." Hale kissed the top of her head. "That's real wisdom right there. Hard-earned wisdom, the expensive kind. Is there any other?" Clara laughed softly. "Probably not." They sat in comfortable silence until Eli started yawning and Thomas began fussing for food. Then they went inside into the warmth and light and continued the business of living. The years that followed weren't easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. They had good seasons and bad ones. Times when money was tight and times when it flowed more freely. Eli grew into a confident young man who could track game as well as any hunter and read philosophy just as easily. Thomas became a bright, curious child who asked questions faster than anyone could answer them. The town never fully forgave Clara for defying their judgment, but they respected her, respected what she'd built, how she'd survived, the strength it took to keep going when everyone expected her to fail. And Hale, Rowan, her husband, her partner, he stayed. Not because he had to, not because he was trapped, but because he'd found something worth staying for. Some people called it a redemption story. Clara didn't see it that way. She hadn't been redeemed because she hadn't been guilty of anything requiring redemption. She'd just been a woman trying to survive in a world that made survival unnecessarily hard. If it was anything, it was a story about choice, about the power of deciding for yourself what your life would be, regardless of what anyone else thought. About understanding that approval was nice, but survival was necessary, and sometimes you had to pick one over the other. She'd picked survival. And then she'd picked happiness. And then she'd picked love, messy and complicated and imperfect as it was. And she'd live with those choices for the rest of her life, whatever that brought. On Clara's 30th birthday, Hale gave her a gift. It was a small wooden box he'd carved himself, decorated with flowers that matched the ones in her garden. Inside was a folded piece of paper. Clara opened it to find a deed to their land, officially registered in both their names, Rowan and Clara Hale, equal partners. "I don't understand," she said. "I thought the land was mine, from Thomas." "It was. But I wanted it to be ours." Hale looked at her seriously. "I wanted you to know that I'm not here because I need your land or your charity. I'm here because I chose you, because we're building this together, and this makes it official." Clara felt tears burning her eyes. "You didn't have to do this." "I know, but I wanted to." He took her hand. "You took a risk on me when you had every reason not to. You stood beside me when the whole world said you shouldn't, and you gave me a second chance at a life I thought was over." His voice roughened. "So yeah, I wanted to do this. Wanted you to know that everything we have together." Clara kissed him, tasting salt from tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Thank you. For this. For everything. For being exactly who you are. Right back at you." They stood together on the porch of their cabin, stronger now, expanded, no longer sagging under the weight of neglect. The garden bloomed with vegetables and flowers. The barn housed animals that were theirs, not borrowed or hoped for. The fence marked boundaries they'd fought to establish. And inside, two boys slept peacefully, unaware of how close they'd come to a different life. A harder life. A life without this particular combination of people who'd somehow found each other in the worst of circumstances and decided to make something good anyway. Clara looked at Rowan, this man who'd appeared like a ghost from a storm and somehow become her anchor. This man who'd lost everything and still found ways to give. This man who'd taught her that trust didn't have to be foolish, that kindness wasn't weakness, that second chances were possible if you were brave enough to take them. "We made it," she said softly. "Yeah," Rowan smiled. "We really did." And they had. Against odds that should have crushed them, against a town that tried to break them, against their own fears and doubts, and the weight of loss they both carried. They'd made it. Not to some perfect ending where all problems disappeared and everyone lived in harmony, but to a place where they could stand on their own land with their own family, living a life they'd chosen instead of one that had been chosen for them. That was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of earth and growing things. Clara breathed it in, holding tight to this moment, this life, this imperfect and beautiful reality she'd fought so hard to create. And then she let the moment go, knowing there would be more, knowing that tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys, knowing that she and Rowan would face whatever came together the way they'd faced everything else. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of courage at a time. That was all anyone could do. And it turned out it was enough.